Hey, what's up, everyone? I hope you're all doing well on this Wednesday evening. Tonight's Instagram Live, I am excited to have Roy from Aqvavitae. He's one of the OG whiskey influencers. We're going to talk a little bit about his online Scotch Whisky Awards, talk a little bit about his recent bottlings of the Ardnamurchan whiskeys, and then, of course, his previous release, the Loch Lomond whiskey. So with that, let me jump in there and invite him on to this live stream. Roy, we made it work.
It's definitely Instagram.
Yeah. I always blame Instagram for these technical difficulties.
Listen, it was your audio was also very clear when I was watching you live, but it's not so good now. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound good on my end. Do I sound a little rough on the edges?
Yeah, but it's fine. I know it sounded fine when you were live. It's just now that you're in here.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's got a bit better.
All right, that's good.
So listen, we'll just need to make it work. Hopefully it's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, there were no invites coming through at all. What's interesting, I'm sitting watching your channel and I took a screen grab.
Mm-hmm.
At 6 minutes past, it's still saying waiting on. So I shut down Instagram, opened it up again, and there you were live. But there's no invitations coming through. I requested to join live, and listen, we've got it. We're here.
Yes.
Apologies to everybody.
Yeah.
It wasn't a boomer moment. I know how to work these things. Sometimes it just doesn't want to give us the right options, I think. So.
Yeah, no, Instagram is definitely. I know we've talked about this before. It's not the ideal platform for streaming live videos and whatnot. So your channel, YouTube, StreamYard, that is a much superior option. But like I mentioned, my audience is on Instagram, so we have to make do with their inferior technology.
Yes, we just need to make it work, buddy. We just need to make it work. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think we managed to make it work perfectly last time. So
yes.
Yeah, I'm not taking the blame for this one.
No, I would never point the finger at you. No, I definitely.
No, I'm not. Just generally speaking, I'm sitting here trying to do everything absolutely right, and just a way. And it's when you said maybe update to a newer version of Instagram, that could be an issue, but I think it automatically updates in the background. Anyway, yeah. We're in good shape, fella. It's nice to be here.
No, absolutely. Again, thank you for taking your time to join me here. I know it's later in the UK. You're at 10 o'clock there. It's only 5 o'clock here, so I really appreciate taking the time. And you're a busy guy in general. You're all over the place with your own platform, with Dramface, with all the various events that you do. So just taking a little bit of time to chat with me, I really appreciate it.
No problem. I mean, Wednesday night is normally a dry night for me. Obviously, Thursday night's wee pub night. But it's a pleasure to make a wee exception now and again.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to you. It's tea time. We would say tea time here. Just after 5 o'clock, you should be eating or something, right? But
well, Wednesdays are dry nights for me too. So we're both making exceptions on our whiskey. Our whiskey standards, at least, trying to keep a strict reduction on whiskey. So I appreciate it. And of course, cheers to that. So as we chatted about offline, we're going to talk about the 3 bottles that you've released up to this point. But before we jump into that, I want to talk a little bit about the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, something that you and a bunch of other whiskey influencers have put together. And just for everybody who's watching, what's a little bit of background of why you guys decided to start the Online Scotch Whisky Awards?
It was Ralphie's idea. Him and I had discussed awards as a general concept to and fro in the past, and I had during those discussions I had no idea that Ralphie's percolating some ideas in the back of his head. But he approached me in probably late 2020, I think it was, and I just kind of sent a message to say, here's what I'm thinking about. And I replied immediately just to say yes. It just makes sense. It's just a good thing. Then immediately the imposter syndrome thing kicks in and you're like, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? Putting my head above the parapet when everything inside my little Aqvavitae world is kind of going quite well and I'm enjoying it and everything. Why kind of stick my neck out to do this? And so I got into discussions with Ralphie and it became clear why I wanted to do it, why we want to do it, why it was maybe a good idea to do, because there are lots of perfectly legitimate awards out there that do a really good job of highlighting fantastic achievements in whiskey. There are lots of kind of less, I feel, legitimate awards as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about a simple kind of pay to play or not or something like that. It's fine if awards are pay to play. You need to make models work in any way that you can.
Mm-hmm.
However, we felt that there wasn't really an awards out there that spoke from the perspective of the community. And when I say the community, I don't just mean you and I, Tim, the people who are kind of, taken to social media or doing whatever we do to talk about whiskey, but I mean everybody that's paying lots of money and gathering lots of knowledge and lots of experience with our whiskies. And I think we all felt almost unanimously that a lot of the awards weren't really speaking to us, and they weren't consistent with the experiences we were having with whiskey. So yeah, we decided to try it, and I mean, that was 3 years ago now. This is the third time around doing this thing, and it's nothing's going to be perfect. There's no perfect model. We've refined it a couple of times over the years, but I hope that we've managed to somehow address that original reason why, as you asked, that we wanted something to come from, something to represent the whiskey drinkers, the whiskey, the folk buying the whiskey.
Yeah.
That's why we wanted. That was our main motivation, and also we hoped that we'd be able to guide people coming into whiskey and give them a really good selection of whiskies. The nominations, I think, do a really good job of that. But also, kind of, if we do it really well, we can maybe offer some feedback to the industry, to producers who care, to look. I'm not suggesting that we would suddenly be able to have lots of answers for them. But if you do anything in business, or if you create anything, or manufacture anything, produce anything, really legitimate constructive critique and feedback is one of the things that you can really use and utilize positively.
Yeah.
So we hoped that we might be able to achieve something like that. But that's the main goal, is to put a voice on the massive and knowledgeable community of enthusiasts.
Now, this is the third year that you guys have done this, like you mentioned. How has the whole process kind of evolved from its initial inception in 2021 to what it is today? I mean, I know the categories are similar. You've made some tweaks here and there, but has there been any major changes from the inception to what it is today?
Not really. It's the only real difference is scaling it up.
Okay.
We've just scaled it up. And when I say scale it up, I mean what we really mean there is that the first year we just kept it with inside YouTube channels, which is kind of mean, but we did that because there was already a community of collaborative channels there.
Yeah.
There was a pool of trusted people working together, and that bought into it immediately and said, yeah, this could be a good idea. We could make this work. And we got together. There was 24 channels in the original kind of makeup. And how it works is that we have to. Whether it's Tim, Whiskey Influencer, whether it's Roy and Aqvavitae, Ralphie and the Bothy, whoever it is, if we're out there mouthing opinions and critiquing bottles and telling people what not to buy, or encouraging things that they should buy, or making suggestions, we've got to take our place.
Yeah.
Because if we just throw out a bunch of tools to help people just nominate whatever they want, what we're going to just get is this kind of what's popular, rather than what is exciting, or what's really quite interesting. So we do that in the first place. We get together and we take our place. So what we do is we have the core contributors, and they're the ones who generate the suggestions and nominations. And that'll switch and mix up every year, so that other people can get involved. We can freshen the canvas a little bit. But we can't put it out to everyone, because if you do that, currently there are 65. And even if they just put forward one, that would be 65 potential nominations.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do is cut it down to just a few and ask them to put in 2 or 3. Then we take those nominations, providing they fit with the category, of course, if they're appropriate for the category. We put it out to all the contributors, and all the contributors see everything, and all the contributors cast 3 votes, and they spread their 3 votes over this multitude of nominations, and that naturally produces a top 6. That's how we create the nominations. So it's very open, it's very transparent, it's very democratic. When I say open and transparent, it's open and transparent amongst the contributors, the people that are working together. And then afterwards, as you know, it goes out to public vote, and usually for about 4 weeks or so, it stays in public vote, so that people can go in and change their mind and edit it and update it, and constantly kind of maybe have the ability throughout the 4 weeks to try behind a bar or swap some samples, however it is, maybe pick up a bottle under recommendation or something, and try more, they can develop, and they get encouraged to vote. So the reason that we're talking about this now is the timing, right? Because we've got 4 days left, I think. On Sunday night, we close the nomination. The public poll closes on Sunday night, so if anybody's watching that hasn't voted, please go along to oswa.co.uk. And yes, plug in a vote. It only takes a couple of minutes. It's very easy, Tim, right?
I just did it today. Very simple.
Yeah. Just a few minutes. And if you don't see anything there that's exciting, if you don't see anything that you can't really make a meaningful contribution towards, by that I mean something that you would buy and buy again, and you would recommend it to a friend. If you don't see that in the nominations, there's a wild card there called the People's Choice. And every single entry there has the possibility to make a difference, because we represent that People's Choice as a top 10 chart that runs alongside the winner in each category. So we actually share the data from that. There's no point in generating data if you're not going to use it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We share it.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's useful to folk.
Yeah, no, and I love what you said when you leave it open for 4 weeks so people can take a look at the whiskeys, and if they want to explore and try them out before they vote, I mean that helps kind of fight the popularity, because there were a few categories on there where I only had one of the whiskeys, and I'd be like, well, it's not fair if I just vote for the one that I had. I might have liked it, but if I didn't have those other ones, then I can't really say for sure that I would vote for that one. So I would say, nah, sorry, I don't have an opinion on that one. But it helps encourage people to explore and try some other ones that they haven't had and really have an informed opinion or choice among the options.
Yes, exactly that. And I mean, it's not perfect, because a lot of people might criticise it, saying, how can I make a vote when I haven't tried all 6 of these in each category? Well, that's not really the point of it. It's not. I think what they often try to do is to compare it to a more traditional kind of blind awards type panel system or something like that. We're doing things online. We're doing things virtually. We have to kind of crowdsource and pool opinion, find a way to tap into what the wider community is enjoying, and this is how we represent it, and this is the process that we go through. It is quite unique. It's not the same as typical awards, and I think the crucial thing that we have to do is just keep it inclusive, transparent, and simple as possible as well. If you found one, as you mentioned there, and you look at it and say, I don't really feel comfortable voting for that, then fine, pause, come back after you've tried more, or just skip altogether. Nobody's forced to place a vote on anything. And then if you're inspired to say, I wish these were here, and add something else in that's your favourite for that category or something, then do that in the free text underneath, and we count it. So, yes, nobody's forced to do anything. We display every year, we share for every category how much of a percentage of people chose to no vote. So for the opening category, which is probably the most popular, that's the entry level, or this year and last year we've actually changed it to be much more specific to value. Wherever you find value, we see that there's a very, very high engagement. Hardly anybody skips that category because they've all got an opinion about whiskies that are affordable and offer good value. Whereas you go into the more kind of obscure categories, Ralphie, and I knew that this would be the case, you start to see a huge amount of people skipping. And that's exactly what we want.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it demonstrates the honesty. I don't have a meaningful opinion that I can contribute something positive here, so I'm going to skip this vote. And then we display that. So once we get into blends, because people tend to love malt, of course. Once we get into world whiskies, because people tend to love Scotch. Once we get into independent bottlers, because people across the world have less access to indies, we see the engagement change. And we want to represent that, because what we want to do is not chase numbers, but chase quality of the results that come back.
No, then that's exactly the way it should be done. So everybody who is watching who hasn't voted yet, definitely, what's the website again that they can go to?
oswa.co.uk, oswa.co.uk, and OSWA obviously stands for Online Scotch Whisky Awards, and that's the S for Scotch, and that is crucial. we are not trying to be an awards for the world of whiskey. Whiskey is so huge.
Mm-hmm.
What we are trying to do is have an awards that represents the perspective of the Scotch whisky enthusiast, which you and I are obviously one, Tim. But the community behind us is very, very diverse. It's huge. And some of us are only interested in single malt Scotch. Some of us are only interested in Scotch. But the majority of us are quite promiscuous, and we like to kind of play and explore other areas too. So even although we are nominating and voting for things outside of the Scotch category, these are therefore from the perspective of the Scotch whisky community, what the Scotch whisky community are enjoying elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really have to do that, even although we see the engagement drop for those categories, because we need to be inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I think loyalty is one of the most risky things in whiskey. If you're loyal to a brand and the brand's quality drops or the prices go up, you have to be open and adaptable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just down to individual producers or brands. The category of Scotch, in order for you to be reassured that the quality is still there, the value proposition is still there, you have to be occasionally trying other things outside of that comfort zone, outside of that steady lane, in order to be assured that you're spending your money in the right place. That's kind of how I feel, and how Ralphie feels about it. So that's why we open it up to other grains other than just barley in the non-malt category. That's why we open it up to world whiskies and anything that is not Scotch whisky, because we think everything deserves a wee bit of a highlight, right? We want to help people explore outside of their comfort zone too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's so much wonderful whiskey and other spirits out there that are worth exploring and trying. Why limit yourself to just a single region in the world? Just to expand, explore, build out your palate. I'm definitely 100% in agreement with that.
It's not for everyone. Some people are quite happy, but at least we're accommodating that side of things too.
Yeah. And if anybody's betting on these whiskey awards, I'm pretty sure you can count on Springbank winning Best Distillery for the third year in a row, given the Springbank love and craze lately. It's only getting more popular.
Well, it's interesting. I think Springbank are unfortunately experiencing a bit of a backlash because of the availability issues since COVID. The pandemic meant that it really exacerbated problems that Springbank were already challenges they were already facing because of the scale that they are. My problem with all of that is that they are having those challenges because of how good a job they have done.
Yep.
And I think it's changing. I think Springbank is not all of the 12 cask strength. I can't tell you the last time I saw it. Local barley, forget about it. It's vaporware, right?
Yeah.
But we're seeing the core range. I think the Kilkerran core, the 12-year-old, the 8-year-old cask strengths, even the 16 this year, the 10-year Springbank. We're seeing the Hazelburn. We're seeing long repeated. We're seeing them stick and hang around longer.
Yeah.
So we're seeing it change because we've filled our shelves. We've filled our basements, our lockups, or wherever it is we stash our whiskey. It's saturated, it's creaking, and I'm not just talking about the people who are there to profit out of whiskey. No, I'm talking about the drinkers too, because we love Springbank. We know how hard it is to get. We're going to hoard it in order to have a backup bottle when we see it available. But I think we're reassured now. We've hoarded enough. Mm-hmm. We're on hoarding burnout, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that hopefully things will start to come back to us. When you mention Springbank winning it 3 years in a row, that is not Roy and Ralphie deciding that they deserve it another year. We're just the spectators.
Of course.
And then ultimately the messengers. If the community decide that it's Springbank again, Ralphie and I just need to stand up there and say it's Springbank again.
Yeah.
However, what we did do you know about the trifecta initiative this year?
No, I'm not familiar.
So what we've done is we've decided that in order to make sure that we can bring and celebrate other producers that are not Springbank in the future, not just for Springbank, but for any category that has got such a standout winner 3 years in a row, they are awarded, on the fourth year, they get awarded a trifecta award. and that's to celebrate them winning it 3 years in a row. But they need to sit out for that year.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair.
But rather than them put them on the naughty step and punish them for an amazing job and success, we ask them to sit out in order to win their trifecta. So they'll come on during that award ceremony and they'll accept the trifecta, and we can make a big fuss out of the fact that they've done it 3 years in a row and look forward to welcoming them back the following year. But then what's going to be super interesting there is to see how that vote spread affects the other distilleries that are nominated in their absence that year. The other bottles that are nominated in the absence of the 3 times winner for the bottles or a brand or whatever it may be. That's going to be interesting to see how that affects things. So we introduced that. One of the refinements this year that we introduced, and hopefully it's a refinement that makes sense to people and they can enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I love that. It sounds like such a great idea to bring other distilleries or whiskeys to the forefront for ones that everybody just loves, and they'll end up getting the vote. So having them hold out for that 4th year is a really well thought out idea. That's really cool that you guys are doing that.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it.
Absolutely. All right, let's shift gears here. Let's talk about the whiskeys we have at hand. So for everybody who's watching, just to remind you, we have 3 whiskeys. All are bottled and picked by you, and that is the Loch Lomond and 2 Ardnamurchans, right? So let's. Is the Loch Lomond a good starting point for these 3 whiskeys?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of. I feel a wee bit bad, because I'm talking about very small out-turn whiskies.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I'll be able to keep the discussion in a much kind of bigger picture perspective, hopefully. But the Loch Lomond was came out last year, and it's long disappeared, and that's a shame. It's a real shame. There were only 250 bottles from a barrel, but this was a release, my first ever release in collaboration with a distillery, and this came about because I tried to, because of pressure from the community, they were getting together to try and arrange their own Barfly's cask, and I was like, no, not in my name, hold off, let me work on this. But I was getting offered the same cask from multiple sources at different prices, and that's when you have to back off and say, sorry, I'm too far away from the source here.
Yeah.
So that I realised the only way I could do this would be to work with producers who saw a value in doing it in a collaborative way.
Yeah.
So there was a few that I was discussing, and I'm still talking to now, but these bottles will be very rare. This is not my model. It's not how I earn money. It's not how I'm funded. So it'll be very rare and occasional. But the one that came forward and was ready first with a really compelling backstory was Loch Lomond in 2022. And it was this one here. I'll hold it up in the hope that you can see. The wee Barfly logo on there is how you tell what it is, but it's a 10-year-old single cask Loch Lomond. But what was amazing about this one is that this was a single cask expression using their malt, which they have made with Chardonnay yeast. So the 2020 COVID special release. So Loch Lomond sponsor the Open Championship. Every year they release specials, and they're large scale, really quite big out-turn special editions. And 2020, of course, the Open didn't exist. So Loch Lomond had the ability to play a little and be a bit experimental and do a kind of a small out-turn, and they released 3,000 bottles of a 12-year-old made with Chardonnay yeast. And oh my goodness, I love the stuff.
Yeah.
And it switched me onto Loch Lomond in a way that I've never experienced before. And it was also soon after that Michael Henry had introduced me to a sample on a live. He came on a live stream in the early days of COVID. Total geek out session on the VPub, and talked about what they're doing at Loch Lomond. And one of the examples he gave me was the Chardonnay yeast. And I remember just how eye-popping it was from a flavour and fruit perspective. It was just fantastic. So I bought that bottle, and I sent the bottle. I gifted it to people. I just loved it so much. So when I was speaking to Loch Lomond, I was kind of pleading with them, how much of that Chardonnay yeast liquid do you have? Michael Henry had a few casks that he'd had tucked aside for special projects, I suppose, and I got to try a few samples, and I got to pick my favourite. And that's how this came about. The whole process took a long time. It was maybe 5 or 6 months, I don't know, something like that. It takes a while for labels and bottling lines and all, even companies that have it in-house like Loch Lomond, it all takes a while. But it appeared in summertime last year. Did you get one, Tim?
No, so actually, if you recall, when I went to Scotland over a year ago, you were generous enough to join us for dinner, and you gifted me a little sample of the... Yes, and I gifted you the Campbeltown Loch.
It's this bottle. This is the Tim Fister bottle.
All right. I'm glad that you've drank some of it already.
Yeah, it's been opened, and I've actually had some of it before we went live tonight.
All right.
So yeah, I'd forgotten that I'd done it. So it's good that you've managed to keep it. So look at how much you have in that wee sample bottle, and how little I have left in this full bottle, right?
Yeah, no, I've been savoring this, and to your point, I mean, this really kind of opened my eyes to what Loch Lomond could do, and just there's nothing too fancy about the cask, but I think you've described it as effervescent before, and that's a perfect way to describe this. I almost get kind of like a effervescent, like Pez candy style of whiskey, and it's so nice and so pleasant and fruity.
It's incredible. The ABV is 54.9, and it drinks like a mid to late 40s.
Oh yeah,
in my experience.
Yeah,
just terrific. I mean, I was anxious about this because it was the first release, and it was to my community, and I was really nervous about. All I wanted was for them to enjoy it. And it's since gone. Everybody that you meet talks about it and goes, "Oh, if only there was more, there's more." And the good news is that Loch Lomond are making more of this. They've been making it ever since I think 2007, or maybe even earlier. I don't know if they were making this. So
yeah,
there's going to be the opportunity to drink this into the future, which is really encouraging, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going to be looking out for that Chardonnay yeast. Now, for people watching, Chardonnay yeast versus the standard yeast usually made in whiskey, what can you expect the difference in flavor profile to come from that Chardonnay yeast?
Well, Loch Lomond have a fantastic way of talking about whiskey production. Almost infinitely, without ever mentioning casks. And that's not because casks aren't important to them. If you ever get the opportunity to visit Loch Lomond, please do, because you'll see just casks are everywhere, stacks and stacks of all variety of casks. But what they're really trying to focus on, and the mantra of the master distiller there, Michael Henry, is one of how much flavour can we harvest in the spirit, so that we're not just relying on the casks to take care of all the flavour and things. That gives them the ability to have much more spirit-forward product releases, much more balanced releases, and then, of course, play with some really active casks to have much more cask-forward releases as well, I suppose. But they can talk forever about all the different ways that they put flavour. So if you just talk about, the barley, the mash, and things like that, from that point onward, you just consider all the forks in the road, let's say, that they have at Loch Lomond. And one of them, of course, is fermentation. They can change the fermentation times. They're experimenting heavily with it. They've just actually released a 3-week-long fermentation. 3 weeks, 500 hours or something like that of fermentation. Incredible opportunity to be able to taste liquid like that. But also the yeast type that they're using is very, very typical for producers in Scotland to use distiller's yeast. Occasionally you'll hear people trying to go for a more old school style using brewer's yeast and things. But more recently, people have become really quite experimental with different yeast varieties. And one of the things that Loch Lomond have been doing is introducing wine yeast. Now, wine yeast, it's not 100% wine yeast that you use in fermentation, because the yeast will not cope very well. It's 30% to 70%, I think. Please don't quote me on that. I'm going from memory now. And to my palate, from my perspective, what that does, any of these wine yeast expressions that you get to try, takes their fruitier style and amplifies it. But in my experience, it also brings this really lovely, almost textured effervescence and fizz to things too. Almost like, sometimes if it really hits hard at you, it almost gives you the impression of like almost a grittiness. And I don't mean that that's the texture of the whiskey is like that. It's just a trait, a thread that runs through it. This is quite a creamy whiskey, I would say. Quite an oily whiskey even. But there's a fizz there that can sometimes give you that sensation that it's almost like a soluble tablet or something. You know, the fizz from that kind of Alka-Seltzer or, you know, soluble painkillers, all of these kind of things. And it can take you down that road. That's my experience of the wine yeast. But I think the biggest thing is just how much it helps the fruit pop. A lot of people look for kind of wine flavors, but we have to remember this is not a white wine or it's not an ex-wine cask.
Yeah.
This is not a Chardonnay cask. This is champagne or Chardonnay yeast that's been used in the mix here. So it's at the fermentation stage before distillation.
Yeah.
So this is from the Straight Neck pot stills at Loch Lomond. They have Straight Neck, Swan Neck, traditional, Swan Neck stills, Straight Neck, and they have a huge copper column still as well, which is pretty unique. They have obviously column stills there for grain whiskey, but this is dedicated. This is in their malt distillery.
Yeah.
A smaller column still that's used to make their 100% malt barley single grain expressions. They're really quite an interesting distillery, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's about. I think if I was to just pick one word, it would be the fruit.
Yeah.
And fizz. And that's two words. Fruity fizz, fizzy fruit.
Yeah, and I mean, the nose is so pleasant too. You could just sit here for hours nosing this. You get that fruitness. I almost get like a touch of a almost like a farmhousiness to it, just a hint in the background, which I really love in a whiskey.
Yep.
And I mean, it's just, I mean, it's so pleasant. You don't get too much of the alcohol on the nose either. So I mean, this was a very well selected cask of whiskey that you picked out here.
Well, I was very lucky that the samples sent to me were actually from Michael Henry's stash. I didn't know that at the time, but I found that out a bit later. So there are kind of casks that he's obviously been putting aside and thinking, you know, but I think it needs the right audience, and I think they were keen because they were probably aware that my audience were pretty geeky.
Yeah.
And they would understand concepts like wine yeast fermentation and want to ask more questions and explore a wee bit more. And there's no better way to do that than to get it in a glass, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to miss this because it will disappear one day. I've been very lucky. I managed to get another bottle. Royal Mile Whiskies were taking care of the retail for this bottle, and the guy from Royal Mile Whiskies called me up just a month or two ago and said, "Roy, there's one bottle that we've been keeping back here. That maybe they hold back for a long time just in case there's they suddenly hear about breakages or a parcel that was never delivered or something." And I said, "Look, what do you want us to do with it?" And I was like, "How can I pay for it now? Can I have it, please?"
Yeah.
So I was very, very fortunate to get another one, and I'm very, very grateful to them. So I can now bottle kill this.
Yes.
And know that there's a backup there as well. I do have another one. I've always had another one, but one that I never want to open because I just feel so amazed that I've got a bottling there that I've been involved in selecting and things, and I kind of want to keep it for posterity. I mean, perhaps I'll use it some point in the future. But if it was my last bottle, it wouldn't be getting opened. But now, I've got one there. So very grateful, very grateful.
No, absolutely. And for your first ever bottling that you were involved with, you absolutely have to keep one that you just store for sentimental and for value purposes. I mean, there's no reason to open it just because of the memories and the story that goes behind it. So that's really cool. I've got only maybe just over half of this sample left, so I will cherish this over the next year or so. And anybody who comes over that is familiar with your platform, I always like to share it with them and get their thoughts on it. But I do love this this whiskey and the sample. So thank you again for sharing this with me.
Yeah, it's quite a generous sample there, I guess. And I remember now that came from the first ever bottle before there were labels on it.
Oh wow!
So in order for me to put the tasting notes together, they sent me through a single bottle, but it was a blank bottle. It was sealed and everything, but it was a blank bottle. And that's what I poured that. So, there's obviously a bottle 1 that's 250, but actually that one was poured from bottle 0.
Yeah, no, this even has more value to it to me now, knowing that this came from the origins. This is where it started, was this little sample here. So again, thank you for your generosity. I mean, that's wonderful. And
You're
I mean,
welcome.
when
You're
it was
welcome.
for sale initially, since I live in the U.S., obviously the shipping was a bit prohibitive, and that's why I was like, all right, well, I would love to try this whiskey. I never thought I would be able to. So when you showed up with the sample, I was very grateful. But I like this one so much, it's inspired me to try your next 2 bottles that you happen to release more recently. And right before we jump into these Ardnamurchan choices, how did going from Loch Lomond to Ardnamurchan, how did your whole process shape your how you approach the next 2 bottles, the Ardnamurchan bottles?
So, it's quite a long-winded story. Everything's long-winded with me. Apologies, but I think it's the right way. So I'll frame it. The first people I spoke to about a collaborative bottle was Ardnamurchan. But before I spoke to Loch Lomond about that release, I spoke to Ardnamurchan. And the reason is that I was doing a live stream from Ardnamurchan, and as part of the kind of fun of it all, looking behind the scenes and setting up for the live stream, we're in the warehouse, and they're letting us sample all of these things that they're working with and playing on. It was amazing. Manzanilla, Golden Promise Barley, and PX, and First Fill Oloroso, and First Fill Bourbon, and there was this cask though that Connell was curious about, just lying around, and I love the phrase that one of the writers in Dramface came up with. One of these little kind of barrels that look like a dug up potato, right?
Yeah.
Just this little kind of cask sitting there. And Connell was curious as to what it seemed. It was out of place, and he sampled the cask to see what it was. So this tiny little amount goes in this glass, and I just get handed the glass. Then we continue on to do what we were originally planned to do, and everybody's around in a circle, just kind of exchanging thoughts on all of this amazing spectrum of different Ardnamurchans that we're trying. And I tried this quiet, humble little refill cask, and it just blew me away. It was so mineralic, and the fruit in it was so kind of subtle and quiet. It wasn't all these kind of bright orangey citrus things that you sometimes get from the cask or whatever. This was much more subtle, and I just went off and I sat on my own. And the guy I was there with, Sevi, he came along and took a picture of me sitting on my own, and he asked me what I was doing. I was saying I'm just sitting with this. Everybody then tried it because they were curious as to what I had found in it. And Alex Bruce, who's the CEO of, I don't know if he's the CEO, but he's in charge of Adelphi and Ardnamurchan Distillery, mentioned to his team, maybe mark that cask. That's a good cask. We might be able to do something with that. So it was the next day I approached Alex with the proposal, is he interested in working in a collaborative bottling, because I'm too far from the source, and I gave him all my woes, and he said, yes, that makes sense. Our audiences, the people that we're selling whiskey to, is aligned. I like the idea. It sounds like fun. As long as you're not in a rush. I said, no, I'm not in a rush at all. And then he said, as long as we select it together. And I said, well, I think, have we not already done that yesterday?
Yeah.
And he said, that refill barrel. I said, yeah. And he said, okay, that's a good idea, tremendous. But of course, what happened, that refill barrel was there for a reason. It had been selected to go off and do something else. So when they went back, the samples that they were taking and sending to me was not from that barrel. So it was parked for a while. There's no rush for these things, right? It's just wait until the time's right. Eventually 2 years passed. I'd released the Loch Lomond. I get to go back up to Ardnamurchan again this year, and again we're doing the same process, but the focus is that this time. It's not a live stream or anything else. I'm there to pick a cask. And the Connell's saying, why do you keep asking about refill? And I said, because I can't get that bar. I can't get that out of my head. I want unpeated, and I want it from a refill cask. So it's really stripping back Ardnamurchan, which is quite young spirit. The oldest Ardnamurchan is probably going to be about 8 years old, right? So it's quite a risky, brave thing to do. But anyway, Connell goes, and we find this huge store of Exadelphi refill hogsheads. And he climbs up the top, and he just starts drawing, because these have not been touched in 7.5 years.
Yeah.
The first one came out lime. The second one came out lemon. The next one came out orange. The next one came out berries. The next one came out dark berries and chocolate and coffee. The next one came out bright silver, crazy, brilliant, creamy fruit. And it was like a rainbow scene that we were tapping. And I think it even surprised the team at Ardnamurchan how amazing these refill, reused, repurposed casks were. But of course, what we're experiencing there, everything's filled at the same time. What we're experiencing is not just a tired old refill cask. What we're experiencing is ex-Adelphi casks. Adelphi do not bottle crap whiskey, they bottle fabulous whiskey.
Yep.
So there's a very, very good chance that the Scotch whisky, Ardnamurchan whisky that comes out of an ex-Adelphi cask is going to have been influenced by, let's say, a pretty interesting parent. And that was mind-blowing to me. So we took a couple of samples of our favourites. I think we took 4, maybe 5 samples back, and we sat in the accommodation that night and we got our heads around what these things were. And I pitched an idea to the team at Ardnamurchan. And it was cheeky as hell. It was so cheeky. We need to highlight what refill casks actually can be. That means releasing 2 casks. What we've basically got is springtime and autumn. We've got silver. One of them I described as silver, and the other one is burnt umber in colour. We've got this kind of fresh fruit, and then this kind of really quite cooked fruit and burnt citrus type thing. And the difference between the two was remarkable. So I pitched that idea, and they're kind of chewing on their tongue a bit, aren't they? Because it's a privilege for me to get 1 cask. It's really, really rude of me to come along and ask for 2. But the way to highlight a concept, we needed 2 casks.
Yeah.
And of course it suited me, because I know how difficult it was to make 250 Loch Lomond spread across the demand. It was, so if I had a hogshead, fantastic, that gives me more. 2 hogsheads, even better. People can choose what their preference is based on the notes and things. But I imagine that most people like you, Tim, probably went and bought one of each. Did you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think in order to highlight what your intentions were, how 2 seemingly same casks can be so different, then I felt like I had to get one of each. You got the 411.
I don't know if you're seeing it.
Yep.
This is the 411, which is the darker one, the blue barfly. So I'm even using my Ardnamurchan glasses tonight. These are like the exact glasses that we used in the warehouse. They're much bigger, so they're really quite good glasses. You can see the colour of that. Now this is a refill cask, right?
Yep.
Incredible colour. And then the other one, which is the gold barfly. This is 413. So everything is identical between these 2 whiskies. They were filled at the same day. They were rolled off and stacked in the same position in the warehouse at the same elevation at the exact same moment in time, and they were left there for the same amount of time. They were sampled at the same time. They were bottled at the exact same time. The spirit is unpeated, Ardnamurchan. Everything is identical. The only thing that's changed is that each of these hogsheads from Adelphi had a previous different incumbent.
Yes.
You can look at the difference in colour. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then you think, okay, so it's just they're a different colour. No, they're completely different whiskies.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not fair. I don't know if the DNA is there, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's one of the most fascinating parts about whiskey and why we love it so much is that seemingly similar products actually will be very different just based on little nuances and changes in how it's made, how it's matured, and whatnot. So, do you have a recommendation? Do we do these both at the same time? Do you have which one we would go with first?
I've found that it makes no difference.
Okay.
They're so bold, they're so powerful. The body's great on both of them. But what you'll find is that when you switch backwards and forwards, it doesn't really matter what order you sip them in. I suppose the natural way would be to go to the lighter coloured one, because the other one's kind of more nut and berry fruit, dark fruit, cooked fruits, a bit of chocolate and a bit of cocoa in there. These have developed like crazy in the open bottle.
Yeah.
And I know that there's no level in here for you to see the difference in colour through the wee window anymore.
Yeah.
But you can see it in the glass. These are quite stark difference.
Yeah, and I think I can
yours is
kind of get the difference in colors, sort of. I don't have a bright light behind me, so
you need white paper or a bright light or something. That's right. But you can see it quite clearly through the wee windows. But this one for me, so there was I gave it to somebody because I couldn't settle on the fruit that I was tasting in this, and the closest I got was some kind of star fruity thing and a bit of unripe banana. I knew it was clean fruit, maybe a white fruit and things like that, and this was when it was the neck pour, and the guy I gave it to just said, no, it's kiwi. And now the only fruit I get from it, the only thing is just that it's really fresh kiwi, right? It's
that is a perfect description of it.
Yeah,
I think
it's incredible.
Whomever you gave the sample to and came up with kiwi, I think was spot on. It
was Michael. Michael will give him a mention, but and I can't taste past it. The other dram, when you sip the darker one, it gives you a whole other spectrum of flavours. But you go back to this lighter one, and it's almost like it's exaggerated that kiwi note again. So it's fine to switch backwards and forwards. I think it's not like you're going to exhaust your palate too much when you're just sipping two whiskies side by side. So this, for me, this has gone all cold coffee in the open bottle. In a few weeks that it's been open, it started to take on this kind of cold coffee mocha note, this almost quite I don't know, chocolatey element.
Yeah, wow, that is vastly different than what I expected. That's really nice.
Is this you trying them for the first time?
This is my first time trying them. Yeah, I haven't had them before,
wow.
This is my first experience with the Ardnamurchans.
I didn't even appreciate that. So it's good. They've been in your house for a while and they've settled. There's no bottle shock happening here or anything. They've had time to acclimatise.
Yep.
I promise you, Tim, you're going to be amazed at how the personality of these two whiskies develops in that open bottle. I've never known anything like it. Listen, I'm not trying to sell anything here.
No.
Nobody can buy these. These are sold out. They're gone. All I'm hoping is that people will enjoy them, and I don't kind of want to put too many tasting notes into, put words in people's mouths and things like that. But I'll be honest with you, while these have been open, they have become more and more and more vocal. And it's difficult for me to remember bottles that have developed in this way. The personalities have just started to. It's like they're playing with me. It's like you come back and you sit down and have them. I get, and they've switched up again on your recollection of the last time you tried them.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah, I mean the darker one, the 411, I definitely get kind of like a dark-ish, bitterish chocolate on the back of the palate. Which is nice, and then maybe a hint of just a very hint of like a light sulfury note from it. Is there any background on what whiskey was in these casks before the Ardnamurchan? Was there any information on that, or is that all unknown, or you don't want to disclose it?
No, I've pushed really hard, and it was when I got this one had picked itself. 411 picked itself. This is the obvious of the dark ones that we sampled. This is the one we're going with, let's say, the one that was going to bring those cooked fruits and the spice and the wood spice and the bitter dark chocolates and things that we're tasting tonight. That picked itself. But this lighter one, there were a couple in the offing, and actually two that I brought home with me because I couldn't decide while I was there at Ardnamurchan. There was two that was so close. That's not true. There was a favourite for me, but I didn't agree with the room. Everybody in the room had voted for the same favourite, right? And I was the outlier. I didn't. So I brought them home and I did it blind, and then I did it blind again, and then you switch it around and you do it. And every single time I did it blind, I picked this one, 413.
Yeah.
So I realised that the room was correct, right? So, you know, if I come away and I went back and I said, no, you were all right, I submit on this one. But there was nothing to separate them. Really, it's really super close.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, I forget what you'd asked me there, but this is my favourite style of whiskey is this lighter one.
Yeah.
And I think that if it was a release for me, just for me to indulge myself, I would be releasing 413 and 412, the one that was eventually rejected, right, the middle one.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think in order for the concept to land with people, we had to do this. And now these days, I'm so glad I've done it, because this darker one, it gets crazy. It's, you know, the fruit is all over the place. The spice can be all over the place. It just, depending on your mood and as you come back to it. But what is amazing is that DNA. The mineralic side is there in both of these drams. You can taste that kind of West Coast style, that outdoor whiskey I keep describing. Ardnamurchan is kind of an outdoor whiskey. It's quite bold. It's got lots of body, and the mineralic thing, again, it was a tasting note that was suggested to me, but it makes perfect sense. I think it's more prevalent on the lighter one, and it's seashells, oyster shells on the finish, a mineralic kind of rock pool type note. And remember, we are speaking about unpeated whiskies here. That's the type of thing that you hear most people when they use those notes. They're talking about a peaty style of whiskey, usually Southern Islay, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I love that those notes in an unpeated whiskey, because they can be a little bit more prominent, and they're not buried by more of those peaty, smoky notes that you get to it. But when you get something raw like this, that's kind of, you can almost taste the environment in which it aged in. It's such a nice, well-made, dirty style of whiskey.
I think both of them are just. And I do want you to follow up, okay? So maybe in a future Tim live stream, you maybe bring them out again now after they've been opened and it's past the shoulder in the bottle or something, and they've developed. And like I say, I'm leading you, right? But I would genuinely like your own take on it, and to see if you feel that they have indeed developed somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the first dram you ever have of a whiskey is rarely going to be your final opinion on it. So this is a nice start. I love the fact that I'm trying them for the first time with you, the effective creator, not the creator, but the chooser of these casks. And I did do a bottle split with this with one of my fellow whiskey lovers. So it already is halfway down the bottle, so it should be able to oxidize and kind of gain some character in short order, since we're already halfway down the bottle.
Perfect. Has he got his then?
He does. I poured them into a couple of vials or glass bottles that I had around. I put the barfly sticker on it so he knew what he was getting, and so I don't know if he's tried them yet, but we'll share our notes with you once we enjoy them and get to spend some time with them.
I hope you do enjoy them. It'd be amazing to hear as well. I was obviously full of anxiety about. It's a huge privilege. You know, how can I even complain about being anxious and nervous about releasing them? The privilege involved is massive. That there's it's not just a whiskey producer. It's one of the kind of kudos, exciting, sexy kind of producers right now. Is Ardnamurchan is really on so many people's lips, and I think it's for a very good reason. I think it's got so much to do with the quality that they produce there and a fantastic team, but I think it's their attitude towards their market and their customers. They don't abuse. They're fairly priced. These are expensive because they're single casks.
Yeah.
All Ardnamurchan single casks are of this price point. But the standard core range stuff, even their cask strength that they put out, the sherry cask, the Ardnamurchan, the Paul and Laz, these are all fairly priced whiskies of very, very high quality, integrity forward. So people are excited about Ardnamurchan and the way they're doing their business, and rightly so. But I was still anxious, because I've chosen these, as you say. I did not make these whiskies.
Yeah.
Ardnamurchan made these whiskies. The Peninsula made these whiskies, and the people up there in that distillery. But I chose them, and I'm aware that the cost involved, for especially people like yourself that's got to ship, all over the world and things, and it does make you nervous. The worst thing that could happen is for somebody to say, "Oh, I don't really like these." You know? And that would that was in my mind, sleepless nights and lots of weird dreams and things leading up to it. So far, it's still early days. You know, these are only like 2 or 3 weeks out there in the wild now. Maybe a bit longer than that, but we're starting to get feedback and people seem to be happy. Mm-hmm. But I think the positive feedback comes quickest. Mm-hmm. So where maybe if there's still some people out there that are not sure about how to, they're not getting on with these or something, just please give it a wee bit of time.
Yeah.
Be patient with it, because it will pay you. It will deliver. I feel confident now. With the anxiety has passed a wee bit.
Yeah, no, and I mean, people, people who watch your content and follow along should have a pretty good understanding of the styles of whiskey that you like, that connect with your palate. So anybody who's going out to buy bottles of whiskey that you selected should understand kind of what to expect when they start drinking it. At least I would assume that would be the case.
Well, we have in a Glasgow Whisky Club, and he's actually a barfly as well. Ewan, will give him a plug. Great guy, but he's a huge Ardnamurchan fanboy. I mean, he loves his Ardnamurchan, and he's become a bit of I don't think he set out to be a collector of Ardnamurchan, because he isn't. Everything's open, but he's collected. He's amassed, let's say, a huge selection of single casks, and he bought these 2 bottles, and he sat down in a lineup of all his Ardnamurchan single casks, and then he put a post on the Aqvavitae Barflies page on Facebook, and I was reading it, and of course he's building up to his opinion of the Barfly bottles, and I'm just kind of, as the line's going by, and I can't help but my eyes are skipping ahead to the conclusion at the bottom, and he declares these 2 refill unpeated casks to be the best of the lineup.
Oh wow!
Now, what I hope that he does then is kind of, because I know that he. Him and his pals, who are also barflies as well, Dave and Neil and Graham Fraser, and people like they're hopefully going to get together and recreate that and do that again. And if they do it blind, it would be even more amazing, I think. Just to see, because even if they don't have the same conclusion as Ewan, even the fact that refill casks can go toe to toe with first fill hammers home that concept that the word refill does not mean used lesser, spent, not all the time. What we're actually talking about in this context is ex-Scotch whisky cask. Quite an amazing thing to think about.
Yeah, no, it really is. And as whiskey enthusiasts, we always are trying to find ways to kind of push the envelope of exploring and seeing different perspectives of whiskey. And I think these 2 bottles are a perfect example of how you can kind of create different whiskeys entirely from a seemingly similar process. So I mean, that's one of the best parts of this whole experience, that you've kind of created here.
If it gets people thinking about the whiskey, fantastic. Mm-hmm. If it gets people talking about the whiskey, even better. Yeah. But if it gets people understanding a concept, it helps them select whiskies in a different way in the future, and maybe have a positive impact. Yeah. But more than anything, the idea that we always talk about the previous incumbent, whether it's what kind of sherry it was, what kind of wine it was, is it first fill bourbon or refill bourbon, and I wanted to get it across. Well, sometimes, if it's a refill, the previous incumbent was Scotch whisky. Maybe arguably the best liquid.
Yeah, exactly.
So for our palate, right? Not always. I mean, some refill casks will generally be quite tired wood, or just what they used to call it, Tim, would have been distillery wood. The casks have been used a number of times. They're still useful casks, by the way. If you're trying to age a whiskey and bring complexity, but you don't want the cask to kill it, refill casks are your friends. So it's one of the wonderful things about Scotch whisky is the climate that we mature it in. We have the ability to let these complex things develop in quiet, cool warehouses. But for that to be effective over decades and a number of years, we really need to utilise refill casks. Sometimes refill casks can just bring glorious elements. Yeah. I love to dream about what these things are. I know you've asked me. I've asked Ardnamurchan multiple times. the answer comes back every time: no provenance, and there is no way if they're not allowed to market their product based on the previous incumbent that was in the cask. They're not going to let Aqvavitae market his product based on the previous incumbent either.
Yeah.
No provenance. They don't know what these casks were. I don't believe them. But they say no provenance.
Well,
I like your concept, Roy. Go with it, run with it. But no.
Well, a little mystery is never a bad thing. You know, we can just maybe you can try to pick out the subtle under-hidden notes and say, huh, maybe that's from whatever distillery. But yeah, I mean, I think the experiment was a success, and I can't wait to kind of explore these two Ardnamurchans more in the future and kind of compare and kind of figure them out a little bit, learn a little bit them and grow with them, which is what we all want to do with every whiskey that we have. Now with these two, or with this experiment, successful like the Loch Lomond, do you have a vision of what your next release might, if there is a next release? I'm assuming there will be, because why stop something that's been so successful? Any teasers on future releases, anything that you'd want to kind of explore or illustrate in Scotch whiskey?
You're cheeky. You didn't tell me you were going to. Listen, I've already explained that this is going to be a very occasional thing.
Yeah.
And I had a lock-in with patrons on Sunday night just this week. And that's kind of nice for me, quite an intimate little community of people that I can use as a soundboard and things. And they answered what I already know to be the truth. If I saturate my community, it doesn't matter if it's really exciting, fantastic whiskies and everybody wants to do this collaborative thing based on kind of bringing concepts and telling stories through whiskey releases and things. If I saturate my community, they'll get burnout and they'll just become a bit tired of the next release from Roy or whatever. So it's going to be an occasional thing. Certainly, this model that we're running right now is working perfectly to be an occasional thing. We're still getting people sharing the Loch Lomond from last year. I fully expect that it's going to be the same with the Ardnamurchans. It's going to be, people are going to be getting together for months with this. The answer to your question in a simple way is yes. I've got discussions ongoing for super exciting things to follow these up with, but all of them need one important element. Something I can talk about with passion, something that's got a story behind it, namely a reason for it, because I'm not an independent bottler, I'm not even an occasional bottler or an armchair bottler, I'm a collaborative bottler, a collaborative select. I don't know what you would call me. There isn't a name for that, right? But it's releasing things to my community that I think they're going to enjoy. So it's going to need, rather than me just somebody come along to me and say, Roy, we've got a cask for you, up for this? Yeah, let's do it. No, it has to be something that I can speak passionately about, and something that I feel that sense of privilege and something that I'm excited to share. So yes, there are. But the problem with these things are, if I start talking about it now, if I was to open a conversation with somebody today, we would be lucky to release it in the next year. So the conversations that I'm having now about next year has been already happening this year.
Yeah.
None of them are at a point where I'm even close to them being bottled.
Yeah.
So it's far too early to talk about it. Just that they are there. My patrons know that they are there.
Yeah.
And what I also need is I need the support from Royal Mill Whiskies. I don't have the retail license to sell booze in the UK or anywhere.
Yeah.
So I need a partner who can take care of the retail, but not just the retail in the UK and domestically or Europe, globally. And Royal Mill Whiskies seems to have done a great job over both releases. So if Royal Mill Whiskies are on board, then we've got something that can work.
Yeah.
And if the community's on board, if my community, if the people that like to drink whiskey and hang out with me and consume whiskey, if they're up for it, then there's opportunities in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll need to get you to come over and collect them rather than ship them, buddy.
It might be about as expensive to fly over there and pick them up, to be honest with you. But you know, it's you've created a community, and being able to just release some of these whiskeys that the community can engage with and talk about and have conversations over and bring people together. I mean, that's part of what we love about whiskey, right?
Well, the amazing thing is that we've always known that the virtual world that we live in and communicate in, and the technology that we use. The amazing thing is that it has the ability to just ruin distances. Just ignore distances. Like you're in New York and I'm in Glasgow and we're here hanging out in real time. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But what these are able to do is kind of shrink that distance even further.
Yeah.
And render it a much more visceral, real thing. We might be sipping the same Bunnahabhain 12 or Deanston 12 or whatever it may be and loving it together. But we can't always know that we've got the exact same whiskey, the exact same batch. It's malt whiskey. It does not want to be consistent.
No.
With releases like these that can be accessed globally through Royal Malt Whiskies, thank you so much for that. Amazing. That shrinks that distance a wee bit more, and that's great fun. It really is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, even though you're not disclosing a lot of details about future releases or when it might be, and maybe be like a George R.R. Martin thing where he says his next novel's coming, but it could be 10 years down the road. We don't know. But either way, I'm looking forward to whatever your next vision is and kind of what you might want to, what kind of story you want to tell in the next selection you have. That'll be an exciting thing to look forward to. Now, I know it's getting late in the UK, so I just want to get you out of here on one question. You mentioned Ardnamurchan, kind of a young distillery, up and coming. What is a distillery that you haven't tried yet, that's new or young, that you're most excited to explore?
Ooh, so there's a lot of them just now. That's the trouble. Is that we're
a lot.
Kind of, we're now getting really, we're now spoiled, petulant children now. You know this, right?
Yes.
Because we've been desperate for all these new whiskies to appear, but now the problem is that we're getting just so overwhelmed by new whiskies all the time that we're starting to go, I'm bored with this now, which is really quite frustrating for a lot of the producers, no doubt. And I think it's a much better complaint to have than having no whiskey or no variety or no choice, right? So, but I think it's valid. My VPub tomorrow night, if you'll permit me a plug.
Yeah, absolutely.
To talk about this very thing. Tomorrow night I've got Billy Walker's new releases, his Michael Tor Trio. This is brand new whiskey. It's never existed before. This is produced while he was in charge of Glenallachie, and now it's out there as a mature product, as a 5-year-old. I've also got the Holyrood Arrival, brand new whiskey from a brand new distillery, and the Hirach from Harris, Isle of Harris distillery. And I've also got something from the East Coast, from Fife. I've got their Rye Law, their inaugural, which is a Scottish rye release. And I'm going to talk about this very, very concept, because all of those 6 whiskies I've just mentioned, these are not new releases. These are new whiskies. They did not exist before these releases. So, the problem is money, liver capacity, shelf capacity, and also this kind of mental burnout that we have from all these new distilleries coming along. That said, I am passionate about whiskey and I love whiskey. How can I be tired of Ballindalach releasing their new whiskey? How can I be tired of the Isle of Harris releasing their new whiskey? How can I be tired of all these new distilleries coming when Diageo are taking their whiskies away from me? Things that I've grown to love, things that I've invested a lot of time, money and liver capacity and shelf space in, are being taken away from me because of ridiculously high prices and very low value propositions, right? So other producers are coming into that place now, and I'm excited about them all. I've probably answered your question already by suggesting Ballindalach. I'm keen. It was a bit pricey when it came out, and I was not there at the distillery. I wasn't first in line. I don't need the inaugural.
Yeah.
The fact that they've started to release whiskies, maybe there's a future proposition that I can engage with. Hopefully something at a reasonable price. The inaugural was not. So I'm excited about Ballindalach because they've been there a long time in Speyside. If you're driving into Speyside, there's a lot of distilleries that you spot on the roadside. Tormore is very distinctive. One of the ones that you will recognise immediately is that kind of courtyard layout of Ballindalach. But they're now releasing their whiskies. I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see mature whiskey coming out of, Wolfburn have now produced a 10-year-old. Incredible, right?
Yeah, it is.
Mature whiskies to come from Ardnamurchan. That's incredible. The prospect of Ardnamurchan maybe one day, I don't know if they'll ever release an age statement, but if they even if they don't, there will be whiskies released with information that tells us the age, because Ardnamurchan are so transparent. The QR code tells us everything we want to know. I think I'm more excited about the incremental things rather than these big benchmark moments of a distillery's first release.
Yeah.
I think it would be rare and almost disappointing for a distillery's first release to be their best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I'm kind of excited about the fact that we've got these people, these producers out there. As we look at these products that we've bought for years, Macallan, all the Diageo products that are becoming more and more expensive, lots of Pernod Ricard products that's becoming more and more expensive. It's almost like you've got this hand on your shoulder and people saying, don't worry, we've got your back.
Yeah.
And they're bringing things that are much more naturally presented, flavour forward, hopefully reasonable price points as well. So there's still a lot of excitement out there for me. But yeah, Ballindalic's probably the one on my radar right now.
Yeah, and I mean, the one of the challenges with new distilleries is the smaller production. So the price per bottle tends to be a bit more expensive. But to your point, if you're getting a natural product, and an honest price, then it's worth exploring and seeing what else is out there and what new releases there are. And to kind of piggyback on that, there's a couple of new distilleries planned for the region of Campbeltown. Is that going to be the next hotspot of Scotland, the next Isle of Scotland? It's 3 new distilleries planned, a new golf course coming. Is that, are the tourists just going to kind of go in droves? That even though that's kind of already happening anyways with just Springbank, that seems like the next Isle of Scotland. What do you think?
Interesting you say the next Isla. Isla's going through a lot of challenges right now just because of the stretching of the infrastructure there. I don't think all the investment is happening at the same time where it needs to be. There's new news of there's new distilleries appearing on Isla. Just crazy. I mean, how many distilleries does the island need?
Yeah.
But it's in response to perceived demand.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was on Isla, asking somebody specifically about these challenges. They can't get their accommodation because there are people there building accommodation, but the people building accommodation need accommodation while they build more accommodation. And it's just kind of, it's these kind of growing pains, the infrastructure, the road network, the public transport, just everything, the ferries specifically, so many issues. And I said, it must be really hard for you. And she said, oh no. She said, no. She said, 30 years ago, nobody wanted to buy our whiskey. I'd much rather have these challenges than those. That was really telling for me. So you've got these positive challenges in order to achieve a very clear goal versus desperation. When the economy, and they can't keep people on the island, people go off to school, maybe university on the mainland, and they never come home again. That was a real issue for Isla. Now Campbeltown is starting to feel the same issues. Springbank employ 100 people down there at that distillery. Amazing. Right, if they've got an opportunity to automate something, they will choose not to in order to keep people in a job. A very, very stubborn way to run a business. But look, they're doing an amazing thing. How can we criticise them when they've achieved what they've achieved?
Absolutely.
Amazing. I think what will happen is that Springbank will start to train staff for other distilleries that move in and pay more. Unfortunately, that's already happening on Isla. That said, this is a positive thing. If the distilleries that appear in Campbeltown are not opportunistic, but they're there to invest in the town and the community, if they're not there to profit out of Campbeltown whiskey, but to actively add to the reputation of Campbeltown whiskey, to support and to keep the quality high, to collaborate with their peers, come up with schemes and things to raise tourism so that all the businesses prosper and flourish on the back of potential whiskey boom. Everything from the restaurants and the bars to the local florist and bakeries and chip shops and whatever else it may be, for all of it to be a positive thing. That's what they need to focus on. And then the global demand for whiskey that's going to drive the success of all of this stuff. Nobody can design that. Nobody can design that. You can just go best foot forward and then just deal with the cards that you're dealt beyond that. 6 distilleries by 2030. potentially more.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's looking to invest in real estate right now, Campbeltown might be a nice place to go and pick up a flat or two, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's gonna become a real. It's already a whiskey mecca.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to become more of that. But the new distilleries that are setting up there, we've got Witchburn, we've got Machrihanish, we've got you just forget them all, don't you?
Dalriada, right?
Dalriata, of course. These are exciting opportunities that just need to be executed faithfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the signals are positive. We hope there are challenges, big challenges, but these are much better than the days in the 1980s, where in Campbeltown there was sometimes only one distillery open, and for some periods of time in the 1980s, none. Mm-hmm. So to have us talking about this today as being a challenge is a super positive thing.
Yeah.
Super positive.
Yeah, just needing to post big signs all around saying reasonably priced whiskeys only, and then Diageo will stay away. They'll be scared off. So that'll be the goal, right?
Listen, Diageo established the idea of regionality back in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. They had the opportunity to invest in Campbeltown back then. They did not. As the malt excitement grew through the 90s and the early 2000s, Diageo still did not invest anything in Campbeltown. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was a threat that the Campbeltown would lose its status as an individual region.
Yep.
We're very, very grateful that Glengyle came along and we do not have that as an issue anymore. Still, at this point, Diageo is not stepping forward. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know what the issue there is. They've had the ability to have a distillery in every region, the only producer to do so, right? Mm-hmm. And they've never ever done it for reasons that I'll never be privy to understanding. Mm-hmm. But it matters not, because if the Scotch whisky industry or any whisky industry in the world ever relies on one producer, that's a really horrible place to be. Mm-hmm. I like the variety. I like the proliferation of all these independent producers that we have on the horizon today is fabulous.
Yeah.
That's the excitement for you and I think, buddy.
Absolutely. No, and a lot of exciting times and a prosperous whiskey future for all of us, at least we hope. All right, Roy, it's 11:30 your time. I'm going to let you get off now. I really appreciate, again, taking the time to share some whiskey with me, go over your releases, your Online Scotch Whisky Awards. If anybody wants to find you and your platform and your VPubs, where can they go?
Just look for me on YouTube. Search Roy Duff. Search Aqvavitae. Search some guy who's very used to staying up this time of night to talk about whiskey for far too long.
No, it's never too long.
But it's just the format. It's just I'm trying to create a space rather than quick, punchy content, and that's where they'll find me.
Absolutely.
It'd be nice to welcome you there.
Yes. No, I always love joining you on the VPub when I can, so I look forward to future VPubs and everything else. So again, have a wonderful night. Cheers, and thank you again for joining me.
Cheers, Tim. All the best to you, my friend. Cheers.
Cheers.